Good evening. In the last few minutes, the Prime Minister has told reporters that the UK is now seeing a second wave coming in, adding that it was inevitable that coronavirus would hit the country again. Here in the Midlands, it was announced that Wolverhampton is to join Birmingham, Sandwell and Solihull in having tighter restrictions after infection rates rose fivefold in just 2 weeks. From Tuesday, people in the city won't be able to mix with anyone outside of their own household or support bubble, either in their own home or garden or anyone else's. Well, data shows that the number of cases across the West Midlands has actually fallen, but the Nightingale Hospital at the NEC is to be taken out of its mothball status and placed on higher alert. Well, let's cross live to our reporter Callum Watkinson, who's at the Council House in Wolverhampton for us. Callum, first of all, just tell us how the announcement today has been received where you are.
Well, as they rolled out extra testing in the neighbourhood of Blakenhall today, the City of Wolverhampton Council pointed out they've actually been asking people here to stick to these restrictions voluntarily for a week now. But from Tuesday, though, they will be compulsory. No more mixing between households, either at home or in private gardens. And the council leader said today there is a very good data-driven reason for this very targeted approach.
We've seen a fivefold increase in cases over the last 2 weeks, which is 90%, and we've got the evidence, 90% are home-based due to mixing at homes or gardens, etc. So we're asking people, in fact the government are now telling people that must stop. We must break the back of this pandemic.
Now, what this is going to mean in some cases is that extended families who were reunited in July after that initial lockdown are now going to be split apart again. And as we walk the streets of Wolverhampton today asking people what they thought about this, I got the impression that there's a distinct air of pessimism about whether this is actually going to make any difference.
Well, if you've been visiting family and you're nobody's ill or anything, right, I don't think that should be stopped. Right, because if you're not well, that you're not going to go to your family house.
We have to follow the government, what they're saying.
I've lost a lot of Zimbabweans. I'm from Zimbabwe. They died with this virus. So to me, 100% agree. People, they are not doing any self-distancing in Wolverhampton, especially in shops. You have to run away, and people are not wearing even their masks.
Well, none of the rules are making any sense. And it's just going to cause confusion, I think, to be honest.
And Callum, mounting problems for parents in Wolverhampton tonight because of infections in schools.
Yeah, this is going to resonate with parents right across the region, Matt. This policy that schools have, based on government guidance, of sending an entire year group home when there has been a single confirmed case. It's causing, obviously, childcare problems for people right around the region, and there's no exemption for key workers, as there was during the initial lockdown. In Sandwell, 3,000 children are now sitting at home as we speak because of this. And here in Wolverhampton, the picture isn't much better.
What's happening in Wolverhampton? We've got 15 children who have got the virus and a couple of staff. But as a result of that, we've got over 1,000 youngsters who now have to self-isolate. These bubbles are too big. It's not right one child gets sick and yet a whole year group of 90 or 120 have to self-isolate for a few weeks. So we urgently need the government to re-look at this. We've got to get those bubbles smaller.
Now, the government says that the bubble system in schools, which is what's causing this, is absolutely necessary to prevent the spread of infection there. But Ian Brookfield, as you heard, says these bubbles are simply too big. Now, he was one of the panellists on the Mayor of the West Midlands media briefing today. Also there was Dr. David Rosser, the Chief Executive of Birmingham's largest NHS hospital trust. And he was asked about the Nightingale Hospital, that temporary hospital, you'll remember, that was built at the NEC when all this started. And he said it has now been placed on an emergency footing so it can be reopened within a couple of days. Though he did point out that just because it provides extra beds, it doesn't magically produce any extra staff. And he wasn't exactly thrilled at the prospect of it reopening.
So if we have to open it, it involves taking staff out of the currently overstretched hospitals and putting them into there as well. So it's not a good thing if we have to do it by any stretch of the imagination, but we are sufficiently concerned that we're putting on its higher alert state, if that makes sense. The levels of anxiety among our staff that we may go back to what we saw in April is beyond anything I've experienced in over 30 years in the health service. I've never known a clinical team as distressed and apprehensive as they are at the moment.
Callum, a bit of a bleak picture being painted there. There's been a lot of speculation about the possibility of another national lockdown. It's being called a circuit breaker, kind of a 2-week press of the reset button. Any word on that from the government today?
Well, the Health Secretary was asked about that in every interview he's done today, and he's done quite a few. He just kept hammering this message that if people stick to the rules that they are being given, and we're being bombarded with these now on an almost daily basis. There were further measures announced for the North West and West Yorkshire today, as well as here in Wolverhampton. But the message is that if people stick to it, that's the way, Matt Hancock says, to avoid that new national lockdown.
Well, the first line of defence is people following the rules, like the rule of 6. The very last line of defence is national action. We want to avoid that by people following the rules and by this local action that we're taking. But of course we don't rule it out, because this virus kills, and we're seeing an increase in number of people in hospital, but I'd rather that we could avoid that if we all come together and do what we need to do.
Matt Hancock there, desperately hoping, as people here in Wolverhampton, Birmingham, Solihull and Sandwell are, that by these very specific, targeted, localised rules, they can avoid that worst case scenario of another nationwide lockdown. Though, as you heard, he isn't ruling one out.
OK, Callum, for the time being, thank you very much indeed. Well, we heard the concerns of hospital staff in Callum's report there, which are echoed in many care homes as well. Today, the government has published a winter plan to support the social care sector. It promises free PPE for care providers and £546 million for what it's calling an infection control fund. It also outlines tougher restrictions on visiting in areas with high infection rates. Well, earlier I spoke to Anita Astle, who is the director of the National Care Association. We spoke about the morale of her and her staff in the face of a potential second wave, which we now know is upon us. But I started by asking her what she made of the government's new plan.
The funding's welcome, because there was a time in March, April time that I was fearing that our home was going to close because of the expense that we were facing around PPE and the number of empty beds that we had because of the loss of loved ones in our homes. So the funding is very welcome. It's just we don't seem to have moved forward and learned about how to support people so that we don't have the number of deaths that we had previously, other than preventing the virus coming into our home. And as there's asymptomatic transmission, that's harder, much harder said than done.
We've heard already on our programme this evening, the CEO of University Hospitals Birmingham said that he's never known a clinical team as distressed and as apprehensive as they are at the moment. Staff, he says, not sure whether they can go through this again. Is that a sentiment that resonates with you?
Unfortunately, yes. Yesterday, I spent most of the day supporting staff through clinical supervision. And even though we're now in September and we had COVID in our home between March and June, it's only now that staff are opening up and talking about their feelings. And actually, my fear is that our staff aren't resilient enough to cope with the second wave. I'm sure they'll find the strength from somewhere, but they are filled with dread at the thought of it.
And as just finally, Anita, you look ahead and think ahead to the months to come, we hear a lot about going, through the autumn into the winter months. How's morale? How are you feeling about it all?
Morale's good at the moment, but I am preparing our team for a second wave. I am making sure that they are aware and they are following all the best practice guidance. I am making sure that they know how to zone and cohort, so that if we do have COVID within the home, that we're keeping everybody as protected as we can and as safe as possible.
Care home manager Anita Astle talking to me a little bit earlier on. Well, more people are asking to be tested for COVID-19, but demand is so strong that there have been long delays in places, as we've been telling you about earlier this week. So how do you go about getting a test? Well, firstly, you should only get tested if you show one of the recognised symptoms. They are a new continuous cough, a fever, or a loss of smell or taste. You can then go online or call 119 and book an appointment at a drive-through or walk-through testing site. You can also order a home testing kit to be delivered to your door, and the advice is to order within the first 4 days of having symptoms. Another option is to pay to have a private test, but it's likely to cost more than £100, and the result is only valid if the test supplier meets certain legal criteria. If you go through the NHS, the result will come by text message. If it's positive and you have the virus, then you must self-isolate for at least 10 days. Well, stay tuned, because after our programme tonight, we'll have more coronavirus coverage, including more on what the Prime Minister has had to say on the ITV Evening News. He's been talking at length to reporters in the last half hour, talking about whether the rule of 6 actually will ultimately go far enough. That programme, of course, coming up after us this evening. Now let's move on, shall we, for the time being, because earlier this week the UK and the United States commemorated the 400-year anniversary of the Pilgrims leaving Plymouth on board the Mayflower in 1620 to cross the Atlantic. Well, they included Edward Winslow from Droitwich, who became a governor in the colony, but the voyage was blighted by tragedy. Nick Smith has more.
The voyage of the Mayflower across the Atlantic has been portrayed as a virtuous journey to freedom. But in reality, their 66 days at sea were cramped, dangerous, and in some cases deadly. And when they made landfall in November 1620, the Pilgrims faced brutal conditions. Barely half of passengers survived their first winter in the new colony.
They weren't where they were meant to be. They should have been heading for Virginia, where there's already people waiting, accommodation, everything you need to settle, and instead they end up some 600 miles away from where they should be in New England. And winter's closing in. Not a very good prospect at all. Well, this window is amazing.
Historian Sue Allen has studied the personal stories of those on board the Mayflower, including Edward Winslow from Droitwich, who went on to govern the Plymouth colony.
Edward Winslow is one of the most fascinating members of this Mayflower group. He plays a major part once they're in New England, because he's like the colony's ambassador. He crisscrosses the Atlantic time again, coming back to England in defence of the colony, on business for the colony. He assists Governor Bradford in his work. He even serves 3 times as governor himself, and he is known for his honesty. This is a really honest, upright, able man. He's like any ambassador should be.
For centuries, the Mayflower has played a romantic role in the story of the founding of modern America. But now, exactly 400 years after the Mayflower left Plymouth, the voyage of the Pilgrims is now being interpreted in many different ways. For the native peoples of North America, it's seen as the start of the eradication of their culture as Europeans came to claim their land. The settlers soon encountered the Wampanoag people, who'd inhabited the lands for 12,000 years. Initially, they helped the Pilgrims grow food to survive, with tales of a great feast in November 1621 forming the folklore of the first Thanksgiving. But things would turn sour. More settlers from Europe came, claiming more land, bringing diseases like smallpox, which wiped out huge numbers of the natives. And by the 1630s, the Wampanoag were a minority in their own lands.
The impact of colonization for the Wampanoag was devastating. The goal had been, if not to annihilate us, to assimilate us so that we no longer recognized ourselves. And we still exist in our ancestral homelands, albeit whole lot smaller because they continued to chip away at the lands that were promised to us forever until there was hardly any bit of it left.
In recognition of this, those behind the Mayflower 400 commemorations helped install this light display on the route the Mayflower sailed out of Plymouth Sound. A reminder that the so-called New World was only new to Europeans, and the impact of centuries of colonisation and oppression still resonates strongly today. Nick Smith, ITV News.
So as I said, most of us who live in the northwest are now living under some kind of enhanced coronavirus restrictions on our everyday lives. Some places, like parts of Greater Manchester, Preston here in Lancashire, have had them for some weeks. But today it was announced that other places will also receive them as from next Tuesday, and it is a very confusing picture. Let's take a look at what was exactly announced today. The latest restrictions affect all of Lancashire, apart from Blackpool, all of Merseyside, and Warrington and Hulton in Cheshire. From Tuesday, different households will no longer be able to socialise in a private house or garden. Places serving food or drink, like pubs and cafes, will be table service only, and they will have to shut at 10 o'clock at night, along with all other leisure and entertainment venues like cinemas. People shouldn't go on public transport unless it's for something essential like work or school, and spectators shouldn't go to amateur and semi-professional sporting events. Now, the existing restrictions in Greater Manchester, including Bolton, remain unchanged, as do the stricter restrictions already in place in Preston and parts of Pendle and Blackburn. So there you go, in Preston the same rules apply, so too in Blackburn and the areas that I just mentioned. The rest of Lancashire now has those new rules. It's all really rather confusing, except Blackpool, of course, which runs under the national rules, that rule of 6 and the requirement to observe social distancing. So a patchwork, if you like, of different regulations and different rules for many people to live under now. We'll go to Merseyside in a minute. Let's stay here in Lancashire, though. Let's go to Accrington. Let's find out what people there have made of it all. And Stuart Flinders has spent the day with them.
They were queuing for lunch at the commercial hotel today. From Tuesday, it will be one of the few places in Accrington to meet someone from another household as the new restrictions bite.
A lot of customers are finding it very confusing and they're a little jaded with it all.
On Accrington Market, they're still taking it in. Barbara Davis, who sells children's clothes, says the new restrictions may hurt her business.
They will if they go stricter, obviously. I mean, we'll still be working. It's how the public react to these, isn't it?
You think they might stay away?
Yeah, it could make it worse, definitely.
Hyndburn has the second highest rate of coronavirus in England. The market's fishmonger blames some people for ignoring safety rules.
I just don't think the younger end are taking it serious enough, really.
Is that the problem?
I don't know whether it's the problem. Thank you very much.
What do you think?
The young ones aren't taking it seriously.
Well, what is it they're doing?
Well, they're outside pubs or where have you, and they're gathering. They're having parties.
The authorities are appealing to people to overcome restriction fatigue.
We know this is a really big ask of people who are tired and have worked really hard to control the virus, but we now need to do more, and more people need to step up and play their part.
Those who've already had the virus know the suffering it will cause if it spreads.
I have had it.
Have you?
Yes. I was one of the early cases. It took me months to recover. I was very poorly with it.
So what would you say to people who wonder how seriously to take it?
You really don't want your vulnerable and your elderly getting it. If I hadn't been in good health, I don't think I'd be here.
Accrington and the rest of Hyndburn has already had tougher restrictions in place a few weeks ago when they were imposed on the whole of East Lancashire. Then they were removed as the infection rate went down. Now new restrictions, and not everybody here is happy about them.
I think it's a bit silly they're closing the pubs at 10. You know, like, because coronavirus is not just going to come out at 2 minutes past 10. I just think it's pointless.
I think you just use your common sense when you go in a shop, put a mask on, just look after your family. That's all that matters, really.
Most people here are simply desperate to get back to normal. Stuart Flinders, BBC North West Tonight, Accrington.
I'm sure they're not alone in that. Let's go from Accrington then to Liverpool. As we mentioned, all of Merseyside, as well as the neighbouring areas in Cheshire of Halton and Warrington, will fall under those new restrictions which were announced today. They won't actually come in until Tuesday, though. Listening to the Mayor of Liverpool, Joe Anderson, a little earlier, he was saying he didn't understand why we had to wait until Tuesday. He's worried, in his words, that people might go for one last hurrah over the course of this weekend. He said many people hadn't been sticking to the rules already in Liverpool, and it will undoubtedly be a blow to a city which has such a vibrant nighttime economy. Eunice Muller has spent the day there.
Liverpool before the rule of 6 came in, but with infection rates creeping up above that crucial 100 cases per 100,000 here, along with areas such as Knowsley and St Helens, not a huge surprise to find extra restrictions are on the way. From Tuesday, there'll be a curfew between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. for many businesses in the hospitality sector. The owners of this bar also own 3 other businesses. One will not reopen as planned this weekend. All will have to close doors at 10.
I think it's just very disappointing and frustrating. I think it seems that the nighttime economy is always the one that takes the hit. I understand that the coronavirus is something serious and has to be taken kind of obviously really seriously.
Merseyside, along with Halton and Warrington, are now areas of intervention. The government has made the decision with the backing of leaders who had urged people to follow the rules.
Gutted that we've had to look towards further restrictions of the freedoms that I suppose we'd sort of got used to after the initial lockdown, that we released people to go about their normal business. And of course, that's going to be hugely problematic for some. I'm just hoping that it's something that we need to do for a very short period.
Here in Liverpool, the visitor economy is worth £3.3 billion a year. Almost £1 billion has been lost this year, most of it down to the pandemic.
I think more uncertainty, which is a problem because business likes consistency and likes to have a plan. So all of these changes and constant new guidelines, new rules don't help as far as that's concerned. Ultimately, I think that the hospitality sector is now staring down the barrel of a gun.
There will also be extra restrictions on socialising between households and using public transport.
I feel like it's a little bit late, but I suppose with the increase, it's good that they're doing something about it massively.
They're juggling between people's health and the economy, basically, aren't they?
After rumour and speculation, restrictions will now come into force on Tuesday. But for how long and to what cost for businesses? Eunice Muller, BBC North West Tonight, Liverpool.
So back here in Preston and in the rest of Lancashire, people are under some kind of restriction. Preston's different, Blackburn's and other parts as we've heard, and then everywhere else under those new ones announced today, except Blackpool, which just stays under the national guideline of the rule of 6 and social distancing. A relief perhaps in the resort. The illuminations, of course, were switched on recently. What are people there made of what's been going on today and what's going to happen in the rest of their county? Peter Marshall's been there.
On the prom, there's relief that Britain's capital of fun has avoided the more stringent regulations facing the rest of Lancashire.
It's good for hospitality, the hotels, the bars, the restaurants, the nightclubs, ourselves and the donkey people. We need to be able to work as long as possible.
It's avoided the tightening because its infection rate, a weekly average of 35 cases per 100,000 population, is comparatively low. Some areas of Lancashire are lower, like Lancaster and the Ribble Valley, but the government's imposed restrictions based on the whole of Lancashire County Council's area. Blackpool is its own unitary authority.
These are national measures that have been implemented, so this is national government deciding on which areas go into lockdown. So this wasn't our decision locally. If we can continue to keep the levels at the rate they are currently, then we don't risk a lockdown. And I don't want to see a lockdown because it damages so many different sectors.
In the resorts, hotels and guest houses, they say 2020 is not about making a profit anymore. It's about minimising losses. And avoiding tightened regulations is vital.
It's absolutely critical. We had a huge and fabulous August, thank goodness. And we're just feeling as though our finances are certainly not stabilising yet. We're a long way off that. But we were starting to recover. So another lockdown would just be horrendous.
Police have felt it necessary to warn against people travelling in big numbers to the resort, where bars won't face the restriction planned for the rest of Lancashire of closing between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m.
Going to Blackpool, if you're not from Blackpool this weekend, and mingling in any large crowds, that is not looking after my family. It wouldn't be looking after your family.
While Blackpool at this moment in time has avoided the more stringent regulations, the council is warning that while infection rates here are low, they are rising. So it's urging businesses and residents to avoid complacency or risk the imposition of more strict measures. Peter Marshall, BBC North West Tonight, Blackpool.
Let's talk to our health correspondent, Jill Dummigan. She spent the day trying to get her head around all of this, all different places. Greater Manchester, we've hardly mentioned, Jill. That's all the same. It's really confusing.
It's very confusing, yes. I think it's quite clear in Merseyside, Halton and Warrington, if a bit unwelcome for some. But in Lancashire, you're now under 4 different sets of rules. So there's Blackpool, as you said, they're under national guidance. That's the rule of 6. You've got most of the rest of Lancashire, those new rules that came in today. So basically, don't go around another household's home or garden and try and avoid public transport. You've then got Preston, where we are now, an extra rule on top of that. You can't see anybody from a different household in public inside. And then if you're in parts of Blackburn and parts of Pendle, you can't see anybody from another household, full stop, public or private, inside or outside. As you say, it took me many hours to get around this. I do this for a living, so how easy it is for anybody to follow, I don't know.
No, I shouldn't laugh, but I am impressed that you've got your head around it and it's all in your head as well. A lot of talk about bubbles. How do bubbles play into this? Just explain all that.
So they're pretty confusing as well, but essentially you've got bubbles in schools, that's classrooms, years, but for these purposes, for households meeting each other, one of the households has to be an adult living by themselves or with children, so a single parent. They can bubble up with another household. That bubble has to be mutually exclusive, so you can't bubble with one household one week and another the next, and that is what a bubble means.
Right, but one thing is clear about all of this. Boris Johnson has said tonight there's a second wave coming. The figures are going up.
Yes, and that is really clear. So obviously Bolton's still the highest in the country, Hyndburn, where Stuart was, second highest, Preston, where we are now, the third. In fact, of the top 10, we have Rossendale, Burnley, Liverpool, Knowsley, Oldham and Bury, and another 8 in the top 20. So there's really no doubt as to which way this is going, and no surprise that these restrictions have been brought in.
That list was about the only thing you hadn't got committed to memory. There's so much for you to remember. Jill, it's brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. I hope that's cleared things up a little bit for people. It is a confusing picture. Many events, of course, for many different communities have been affected this year because of the pandemic. Today is Rosh Hashanah. It's the Jewish New Year, but no gatherings for them, no people coming together, no families getting together with other families. So Naomi Cornwell has been to Prestwich. She's been to talk to the Lurie family to find out how they're going to celebrate, just in a different way.
These are Gabrielle's gluten-free challahs, ready for the Rosh Hashanah meal, made specially with extra honey.
The Lurie family has been busy baking.
And these are baked apples with nuts and dates and honey to wish us all a sweet, happy year.
Rosh Hashanah is the most important Jewish festival. It's massive. Obviously this year is extremely different. There's huge restrictions. We've got a very big dining room table. This year we can only have 6 people. So there's going to be lots of people on their own. It's very sad that that these people are going to be isolated this year.
But on a positive note, I mean, obviously it's a time for reflection and to be grateful that we've survived the last 6 months as a community, as part of, obviously we've had losses in the community and in our family, but we've got a lot to be grateful for, and I think we need to focus on that.
So what do you look forward to the most?
Dipping the challah in the honey.
Yes, I also
and
enjoy
honey
that.
cake.
Tomorrow I will go to synagogue very early in the morning on my own, and then I will be swapped by Kate, who'll go with the girls because we have to do it in shifts because of the social distancing.
We've got 3 children. Our little boy, who's younger, he's 11 years old, and in our particular synagogue they only allow children above the age of 12, so he won't be allowed to go to synagogue at all.
And once families arrive at synagogues like this, everything will be very different.
This is our function hall, and at a busy weekend like this, we need as much capacity as we can get, and that's why we're using this as another synagogue. In the normal year, at any one time, there could be 600 to 700 people on the campus. This year, we've really got a maximum of about 200, 240 people.
Extended family have already been telephoned and wished Shana Tova a good year. Now it's time to put technology away, time for reflection and all that lovely food. Naomi Cornwell, BBC North West Tonight in Prestwich.
But first tonight, restrictions on freedoms have been reimposed in parts of West Yorkshire barely 2 weeks after they were lifted. Stubbornly high COVID infection rates in Bradford, Kirklees and Calderdale has meant that from Tuesday, people living in those areas will not be allowed to meet people from outside their household or bubble in their homes or in their gardens. It's disappointed people in these parts and those areas where rules have previously been relaxed. So let's go live now to Rachel Townsend, who's in Ilkley for us. Rachel, what has been announced where you are this evening?
Yes, thanks, Gaynor. Well, Ilkley falls under Bradford Council, and 16 days ago, people here were enjoying new freedoms. But come Tuesday, that will come to an end once again. The news filtered through here this afternoon, and it has not gone down well. The people of Ilkley, like in many West Yorkshire towns and cities, are preparing for new restrictions on their freedom. From Tuesday, mixing households will be banned. Anne Hawksworth is a councillor here. She believes the move is unfair.
I actually thought it was going to happen because I could see it approaching because of the fact that so many of the other areas were actually increasing. It's just, it sticks in people's gullet, the fact that we've no cases here.
And many here in Ilkley are in agreement.
I think that there's no consistency. I think that it's confusing. I think that from week to week nobody knows what it's on about, and I think that it doesn't make sense that you can go out fox hunting if you so wanted to, but yet you can't go for Sunday dinner at your parents'.
It doesn't make sense. There's a kind of illogic about it. It's kind of hard to understand.
I think there's a lot of mixed messages as well, because I think, like, as Ilkley is an LS postcode, isn't it? But it's been linked in with Bradford, and I don't know, I think there's lots of differences between the two places. I mean, this is much higher.
Prompted by a rise in coronavirus cases, there's now a ban on meeting in private homes or gardens unless you're in a support bubble. Pubs, restaurants and cafes remain open, but you can only go with members of your own household. Up to 6 people can still meet outside at a social distance in parks or public places in line with national guidelines. And you can still go to work and mosques and other places of worship as they remain open. In Bradford, religious leaders have urged people to support the government's latest announcement.
We've all got to protect not only ourselves but each other. And I know of people who have unfortunately passed away with coronavirus. One of my good friends, the famous Norman Hunter. It's a terrible, terrible disease, and we've got to do what we can to help each other.
But others have a less favourable view on the new restrictions.
We're just disappointed because Matt Hancock, the very same day, had said everything that they are doing is driven by data. And we thought, we were getting our numbers down. We thought we were doing quite well. And we were a little shocked that we were put in where next door, Leeds, seemed to have worse figures than us, but weren't put in.
As people in these communities prepare once again to close their doors to friends and family, that return to normality seems a long way off.
Rachel, we've been hearing all week that Leeds might have tighter restrictions imposed. Did that happen today?
Well, in a word, Gaynor, no. Leeds has managed to avoid those tighter restrictions, which has raised a few eyebrows, to say the least. Now, the number of cases in Leeds has been rising significantly recently. In fact, it now stands at over 78 per 100,000 people. Now, that is higher than Calderdale. It is higher than Kirklees, so many expected it to be on that list today. Now, we understand that the government was ready to impose some sort of lockdown on Leeds, similar to that seen in the northeast, but instead leaders at Leeds City Council asked that instead they put a curfew just on bars and restaurants. That was rejected by the government, and so we were told, and instead the government have given them a week to try and get the number of cases down. So in a sense it is in their hands, and if they can't get the number of cases down in the next 7 days, well, it seems inevitable that Leeds will go into some sort of lockdown.
Rachel Townsend for us this evening in Ilkley. Thank you very much. Well, let's get more about the situation in Leeds, because a little earlier I spoke to the council leader, Judith Blake, and I began by asking her how close the area had come to having local lockdown restrictions imposed today.
Clearly, we had conversations with them all through the week about what possible extra measures we could have if it was appropriate. And at the end of the day, when they looked at our situation, the numbers that we have, the government decided that they wanted us to stay in the same situation, working with the people of Leeds, a very strong messaging asking people to take responsibility, to wash their hands, keep their distance, wear their face coverings and self-isolate, hopefully bringing down the numbers and helping us to move forward without having to have further restrictions.
Did Leeds actually ask for a curfew?
It was one of the different scenarios on the table, not specifically, but we felt that the government might be expecting us to have extra restrictions, but as it turned out, they felt that they wanted to let things bed in. It's only a week since we've had the enhanced support, and obviously only a week since the rule of 6 came in.
7 days now to bring down the infection rate. How confident are you that this can be achieved? Because otherwise, this time next week, Leeds will go into stricter lockdown.
Possibly by this time next week, the government will decide that they want to bring in more restrictions right across the country. It's such a fast moving situation. All I can say is that the rate is going up slowly in Leeds. It's not spiking at the moment, which is why we're in the position we're in. But we absolutely depend on every single person in the city and coming into the city to really listen to the messages and to comply, to keep safe so that they can keep everyone else safe and to avoid further restrictions. If we continue, then I'm afraid it's very likely we will have to have further restrictions, which I don't think any of us want to see. But it's absolutely vital that we get the message out that just how serious this is and how close we are to having to bring in restrictions, possibly for businesses, for households. All of them will have an impact on people's lives.
Councillor Judith Blake speaking to me a little earlier. Well, there is a plea tonight for people to follow the social distancing rules from a Sheffield man who has just been able to come home from hospital where he was admitted back in March. Paul Barber was on a ventilator for more than 10 weeks of his stay at both the Hallamshire and Northern General Hospital in Sheffield. His family and his doctors feared he just wouldn't survive. Katie Oscroft reports.
After 6 long months in hospital, more than 60 days of that on a ventilator, Paul Barber was well enough to leave. Doctors thought Paul might not survive what COVID-19 did to him. Now they can't believe how well he's recovered. And back home in Sheffield, Paul and his wife are just glad to be back together.
Remarkable. A day that I didn't think at times would come, but it's just incredible and so happy.
It's been a long journey, though, hasn't it?
A very long journey.
It's been bad times and good times. Now we've got here in end. We've had fantastic care, haven't we? Nurses and doctors, everybody has been absolutely fantastic.
Elaine Barber lost her mother Dorothy to coronavirus back in March, less than 24 hours later, and she had to call for help for her husband.
In 10 minutes, the paramedics was in the front room doing exactly the same as what they'd done to Mum the night before to him and taking him. So you can imagine, I just had the worst thought that the same was going to happen again.
Now the couple are urging everyone to avoid a second wave and abide by the rules.
Please, please listen, don't be complacent about. I mean, Paul was as healthy, worked 7 days a week up to the Friday, and I was admitted on the Tuesday, and by the Thursday he was on a ventilator.
People must adhere to so many people in a house and keep it apart and things like that. So important,
yeah,
because it's a killer.
Doctors who helped to treat Paul have echoed that.
We need to keep up our social distancing, wear our masks, wash our hands. All those messages are just as important as they ever were, if not more so, as we try and get back to a new normal.
Paul is grateful for his care in hospital, but happy to be home.
We've lost a summer.
We'll make up for it next year.
We've gained a lot of experience from it, love, haven't we?
We have, yeah.
And it's brought up family a lot. Well, we were close anyway, but even closer still now.
The couple are now looking forward to the future they thought they might not have. Kitty Oscroft, ITV News, Sheffield.
That's first to them for a while.
Well, next tonight, from today, cafes and restaurants must by law take contact details from customers to help with tracing the spread of COVID-19. Hospitality has been one of the hardest hit areas of the economy. And with talk today of that sector possibly being targeted in another potential lockdown, these are worrying times for those who work in the sector. Chris Kiddy reports now from Sheffield.
Hey guys, how you doing? To start out today, I've got to take your contact details.
Jonty Cork's been running his busy cafe in Sharrow for a decade now. He's already had to take out 6 tables to comply with social distancing rules, but he doesn't foresee problems with the new track and trace rules.
We're a very everyday, comfortable environment to be in, so obviously you don't want to feel like you're intruding on people's personal space. But I think people would be quite welcome to give their details.
And the customers we spoke to didn't mind being asked for their details.
It's good to know where people have been, and you can track where, the virus and who's had it and who hasn't.
I just wonder how effective the actual tracing of people is should somebody become positive.
I was a track and tracer up until like 3 weeks ago, and we struggled a lot with not having a lot of contact details.
Sheffield's Director of Public Health says customers will now face a stark choice.
If the business is doing using the app, using the QR codes and doing the tracing, there is a sort of, well, if you don't want to comply, go and eat somewhere else or you won't get fed.
Donya Wasim has been researching contact tracing for businesses.
It is one of the key recovery strategies. It's always been a good recovery strategy, but how effective it would be depends on how consumers are willing to participate in it.
But more pressing matters may be on the horizon for the many cafes and bars in this part of Sheffield. The chance that hospitality may face further restrictions in the coming weeks. Maurizio runs a popular Italian restaurant.
If we shut down again completely for, let's say, 2 weeks or more, it's going to be a big impact. It's going to be another hard time, and to see if we can get going again, because I'm not quite sure.
Just down the road, cafe owner Kent is also concerned.
Of course I'm worried. We still have to pay our bills. And we're still recovering from the last shutdown. We're still negotiating with landlords and talking to suppliers and all the rest of it.
South Yorkshire's Police Commissioner says if more restrictions are brought in, the public should be sensible.
People have to realise that there aren't police sitting around waiting to do this kind of work. They've got their normal jobs to do, and this is over and above that. So it's incumbent on all of us to obey the law and follow the rules and regulations.
Just as life was returning to something like normality then, big changes could once again be just around the corner. Chris Kiddie, ITV News, Sheffield.
Well, the Prime Minister has been speaking about the latest COVID restrictions. This is what he said within the last few minutes.
We're looking very carefully at the spread of the pandemic as it evolves over the last few days, and there's no question, as I've said for several weeks now, that we could expect, and we are now seeing a second wave coming in.
Prime Minister speaking a few moments ago. Well, more and more people are asking to be tested for COVID-19, but demand is so strong that there have been long delays in places. People have also been given tests hundreds of miles from where they live. But how do you go about getting a test? You should only get tested if you show one of the recognised symptoms, and they are a new continuous cough, a fever, or loss of smell or taste. You can then go online or call 119 and book an appointment at a drive or walk-through testing site. You can also order a home testing kit to be delivered to your door, and the advice is to order within the first 4 days of having symptoms. Another option is to pay to have a private test, but it's likely to cost more than £100, and the result is only valid if the test supplier meets legal criteria. If you go through the NHS, the result will come by text message. If it's positive and you have the virus, then you must self-isolate for at least 10 days. And all the very latest information is on our website, including a reminder of the Rule of 6. It is at the usual address of itv.com/calendar. Thank you, Joe. Now, this week saw the UK and the United States commemorate the 400-year anniversary of the Pilgrims leaving Plymouth on board the Mayflower to cross the Atlantic. A core contingent came from North Nottinghamshire and South Yorkshire, but their experience was blighted by tragedy. Ultimately, the separatists turned from the oppressed to oppressors. Nick Smith has been hearing some of their stories.
The voyage of the Mayflower across the Atlantic has been portrayed as a virtuous journey to freedom. But in reality, their 66 days at sea were cramped, dangerous, and in some cases deadly. And when they made landfall in November 1620, the Pilgrims faced brutal conditions. Barely half of passengers survived their first winter in the new colony.
They weren't where they were meant to be. They should have been heading for Virginia, where there's already people waiting, accommodation, everything you need to settle, and instead they end up some 600 miles away from where they should be in New England. And winter's closing in. Not a very good prospect at all. Well, this window is amazing.
I spoke with historian Sue Allen in Alsterfield in South Yorkshire, where famous colony governor William Bradford was born and close to where he met Pilgrim figurehead William Brewster.
Well, you can't think of William Bradford without conjuring up an image of William Brewster. These two go hand in hand. William Brewster is the brains, the spine, the backbone of this separatist movement in England. William Brewster served as a trainee diplomat, and you can see how that would have helped young William Bradford, who was only in his 30s when he became governor, to become the fine figurehead of the New England colony.
For centuries, the Mayflower has played a romantic role in the story of the founding of modern America. But now, exactly 400 years after the Mayflower left Plymouth, the voyage of the Pilgrims is now being interpreted in many different ways. For the native peoples of North America, it's seen as the start of the eradication of their culture as Europeans came to claim their land. The settlers soon encountered the Wampanoag people, who'd inhabited the lands for 12,000 years. Initially, they helped the Pilgrims grow food to survive, with tales of a great feast in November 1621 forming the folklore of the first Thanksgiving. But things would turn sour. More settlers from Europe came, claiming more land, bringing diseases like smallpox, which wiped out huge numbers of the natives. And by the 1630s, the Wampanoag were a minority in their own lands.
The impact of colonization for the Wampanoag was devastating. The goal had been, if not to annihilate us, to assimilate us so that we no longer recognized ourselves, and we still exist in our ancestral homelands.
In recognition of this, those behind the Mayflower 400 commemorations helped install this light display on the route the Mayflower sailed out of Plymouth Sound. A reminder that the so-called New World was only new to Europeans, and the impact of centuries of colonisation and oppression still resonates strongly today. Nick Smith, ITV News.